Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the ninth live interactive session for sustainable transportation systems. I'm Seri Vinayakan, PhD scholar from the Civil Engineering Department at IIT Madras. Okay, let's start with an overview of the contents for week 9. Okay, so as you remember, like last week, week 8, what we were looking at, like towards the end, we finished with the modeling of transport emissions, right? So in week 9, we continued with this transport emission modeling. Okay, so in the first lecture, we looked at several case studies, right? So as we looked at different models of transport modeling emissions, right, in the last lecture of week 8, so we were looking at some case studies with respect to these models. Okay, so in particular, we were looking at two models. One is the IVE. So what is IVE? So IVE is a model which is international vehicle emissions. Okay, it's an international vehicle emissions model, right? So this, why did we, why are we interested in this? Why? Because several of the models that we looked at in the last week, so they were mostly region specific, right? So they were for particular geographic and climatic conditions, right? So they were not really applicable or transferable to other locations. But this IVE was one attempt, yeah, to have a generalized model, especially for the developing countries, right? So we looked at one case study with respect to this IVE. We looked at a study of how the vehicle, emissions and the activity patterns, are related. And then we also looked at another model called VAPI. So this VAPI stands for Vehicular Air Pollution Inventory, right? So this is a model that was developed in India, right, by IIT Roorkee, right? So this model is important because this is more, specifically developed for, to use in developing countries like India, right? So therefore, we looked at some case studies with respect to this VAPA model, right? So the case studies involved looking at, how the impact of altitude is there on the vehicular emissions, specifically criteria pollutants and hazardous pollutants. And also we looked at how to calculate this emission factors and so on. Right. So that was with respect to the first lecture. Moving on to the second lecture of week 2, so we looked at different models of dispersion, right? So once this pollution is emitted, right, it's not going to remain in a single location, right? It's going to spread in both the vertical and the horizontal direction, right? So we need to be able to estimate what is the extent of this spread, right? So how far will this impact be, right? So to do that, we need these dispersion models, right? So yeah, again, we looked at several types of these dispersion models. So there are different types like the box model, right? So we looked at Gaussian models, Lagrangian models, and some computational fluid dynamic models as well. And one particular example of these models we looked at in the transportation sector. So that is the line source model, line source dispersion model. So what is this line source? So very commonly that we use in the transportation sector is a line source where we model the roadway as a single line, right? So the emission comes, are emitted in the across a particular line, right? So we model the roadway in terms of a line, and we looked at an example of that in the second lecture. So with that, the modeling of emissions was concluded. Then we moved on to how to estimate the level of traffic noise right? So again, we looked at various models that were developed, from different countries, right? From the US, the FHWA model, the UK, Germany, France, and so on. So all these different models and their limitations and advantages also were covered in the third lecture. Then in the fourth lecture, so we looked at different policies and initiatives that were taken up in the global scale for an sustainable development, right? So we looked at different conferences and summits and also their major outcomes, and then we moved on to looking at specific policies and measures brought by the Indian government, right? So we looked at those, and then finally how or what mitigation measures can we take to combat the climate change through sustainable development. And then in the final lecture, we looked at one particular program in India, which is the National Clean Air Program, commonly abbreviated as NCAP. Right? So, what are the objectives of this NCAP program? And then finally, we looked at what are the different factors that create pollution in the transport sector, and what are the some of the common measures that we use to mitigate these. So those were covered in the final lecture of week number 9. Okay. So with that, we'll move on to some questions. So the first question for week 9 is: the vehicle air pollution inventory VAPI model does not include dash. So the options are: A, temperature correction factor; B, humidity correction factor; C, altitude correction factor; and D is a speed correction factor. Okay, the poll is launched. So whenever you are ready, you can answer the poll. So we have one vote for D, the speed correction factor. Okay, any other answers? All right. So let's take a look at the answer. So the right answer is option D. It is the speed correction factor, right? So here we are looking at the VAPI model. So again, so this is the model that was developed in India, right, for estimation of emissions from traffic, right? So if you look at it, so this is the core architecture of the VAPI model given here. So we have a variety of inputs that are being taken into this model, right? So it outputs different things. So we can estimate the non-exhaust emissions, right? So we can estimate the evaporative emissions as well as the exhaust emissions or the tailpipe emissions. So if you remember from the previous week, so we had three different types of emissions. So that is the major one or the primary one is the exhaust emissions. Then we also had the evaporative emissions as well as the non-exhaust emissions, right? So all these three outputs can be obtained from the model, right? So for that it takes into account a various input parameters. So including how what is the total number of kilometers that the vehicle has traveled, the different vehicle ownership saturation level, also the characteristics or the of the region like the human population, the phasing out age of the vehicle, the GDP, and so on. So in addition to these inputs, there are also several correction factors that are used in the model. So if you look at it, there are three specific correction factors. One is for the altitude of the region, right? So second is for the humidity, and the third is temperature, right? So these are climatic adjustments for the climatic conditions, right? So different areas will have different climatic conditions. So to account for these variations, so we have these three correction factors included in the model, right? So, but if you look at it, the speed is not one of the factors for which the correction is being used, right? So it's only for these climatic conditions of altitude, humidity, and temperature, which is being accounted for in the model. So the speed correction factor is not being used. Therefore, the right option is D. Then the speed correction factor is not considered. Okay. Moving on to question number 2. Which of the following is not a Gaussian dispersion model? So the options are AirMod, CalPerf, GRAL, and Calin 4. Vote for A. Any other answers? Right. So let's look at the answer now. So the right answer is option C. It is the GRAL model, right? So we looked at different types of these dispersion models in the second lecture of this week. So if you look at it, there are four major types. So one is the box model, right? Second is the Gaussian model. Third, we have Lagrangian or Eulerian models, and number four is the computational fluid dynamic models, right? If you look at it, the given models, so which is AirMod, CalPerf, and Calin 4. So these actually come under the Gaussian models, right? So we have Calin 4, right? CalPerf, and AirMod, right? So these are Gaussian models, whereas this GRAL comes under the Lagrangian or the Eulerian type, right? So therefore, the question was about which is not being which of the one is not being a Gaussian dispersion model. So it is the GRAL model, right? So so these models differ in how they model the dispersion into the atmosphere. So different assumptions in terms of how this discussion takes place is how these models vary. For example, in the box model, we consider a steady state, three-dimensional, box, right, within which the concentration of the pollution is estimated. In the Gaussian models, we assume that the pollution concentration or the dispersion will increase as we move farther away from the source, right? Or the concentration is going to reduce as we move farther away from the source, right? So like that, these models differ, and these three models that are given here, the ones tick, they are come under the Gaussian. Question number three is vehicular emissions are not considered as a line source of emissions. Right? So we have to say whether this statement is true or false. Okay, so we have one more for A, true. Yeah, so we have a vote for A. Any other answer? All right. So the right option is actually that the given statement is false. Right? What's the given statement? It says that vehicle emissions are not considered. Right? So which means that it is not a line source of emission. But actually, we consider the emissions from vehicles to be a line source of emission. So what do we mean by that? If you look at the source of these emissions, so we have categorized them into different types. So one is the point source, right? So what is the point source? So the which means that it is fixed in position, right? So it does not change. So always we get the emissions from the same location, right? For example, emissions from stacks, right? So we can see that it's always going to be from the same location every time, right? So therefore this is the point source. Second, we have a line source. So line source in this case we'll have a single dimension in which the source location can vary, right? So we have some start point, some end point, and if we join them by a straight line, so the emission could occur from any of these positions, right? So this is a line source. So road emissions from the road, we'll consider it to be a line source, right? It's not exactly a line source, but we'll be approximating it to be a line source because the lateral spread will be very less, right? So only in the longitudinal direction there will be a lot of change, right? So therefore it is considered to be a line source. So apart from this we have the area source where we have variation in both in both the x and y direction, right? So the emission could come from a wide area, right? So therefore this is called as an area source. Then we have volume sources, like if it is from a building, right? So you have all the three dimensions included, so those are volume sources, right? So whereas for the road case, so we consider it to be a line source, right? It's an approximation that we make, and but the given statement says otherwise, right? It says that it is not considered as line source of emission, but vehicular emissions are coming from road, therefore it belongs to the line source of emission. So the given statement is false. Okay, question number 4. The Paris Agreement's central aim is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping the global temperature rise this century well below 1 degree Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. Okay, so we have to say whether this statement is true or false. one more for option B. Any other answers? Right. So the right option is actually option B, that the given statement is false. Right? Why is it false? So what is this Paris Agreement? So this Paris Agreement, it is one of the global initiatives, right? So we looked at multiple of these. So this Paris Agreement, so it was it happened in December 2015, right? So in this Paris Agreement, it was decided that combat this climate change. So, countries worldwide should reduce their global, greenhouse gas emissions, right, to keep the to reduce the rise in temperatures, right? So the global temperature rise. So the average temperature rise is or was planned to be kept less than 2 degrees Celsius before the 2 degrees Celsius. It should not be higher than 2 degrees Celsius than what it was in the pre-industrial levels. Right? So, which is this pre-industrial period? It is the duration between 1850s to 1900. So, whatever was the global average at that time. So, right. So, we should not exceed that by 2 degrees Celsius. Right. So, to do this, we have to reduce our global the greenhouse gas emissions. Right. So, this was what was the ultimate goal of this Paris Agreement, which happened in December 2015. However, the given statement here says that it should be it was decided that it should be less than 1 degree Celsius, right? So, but it was not. It was decided to be less than 2 degrees. It is good if we keep it below 1 degree, but it is highly unlikely given our current rate of emissions, right? Right. So it is actually 2 degrees and not 1 degree according to this agreement. So therefore, the given statement here is incorrect. Okay, question number 5 is the total number of targeted cities under the National Clean Air Program NCAP is dash. So the options are 87, 105, 117, and 122. One more for B, 122. Okay, any other answers? Right. So the right option is it is option B, 122. Right. So we looked at the National Clean Air Program NCAP, right, in the last lecture of week 9. right? So what is this NCAP? So it is a national level program, right? So it's a strategy that was brought by the central government to tackle the air pollution problem in the country, right? So if you look at the draft version of the NCAP, so there were initially 94 cities that were targeted, right? So 94 cities where this non-attainment of this, the levels were there and they were targeted and brought into this program. But by the final draft, eight more cities were added to it. Right? So by the end of this NCAP draft, so finally we had 102 cities. But the National Green Tribunal, directed to add 20 more cities to it. So finally we had 122 cities coming under the National Clean Air Program. Okay, therefore, the right option is B. It is 122. Okay, moving on to question number 6 is the objective of NCAP is the reduction of which of the following pollutant. So the options are SOx, particulate matter, NOx, and heavy metals. Okay, so you have one vote for B, particulate matter. Any other options? All right. So the right option is option B. It is the particulate matter, right? So, so as I already mentioned that this NCAP is a program that was brought by the central government to tackle the air pollution problem in the country, right? So if you look at it, the objective was to reduce the particulate matter by about 20 to 30% by 2024, right? So this was particularly focusing on this reduction of the particulate matter levels across the country, right? So why? Because the others are also an issue, but SOx, NOx, and heavy metals. So these concentrations were mostly observed to be within the national standards, right? But it was the particle matter which was observed to be a problem because it was exceeding the national ambient air quality standards, across the country. Therefore, the focus was to reduce the particulate matter concentration, and that was the objective of this NCAP program. Okay, so therefore, the right option is B. Okay, question number 7 is the National Action Plan on Climate Change (NAPCC) was adopted by India in the year dash. So the options are 2005, 2006, 2007, and 2008. have one more for India, 2008. Any other answers? Right. So the right option is it is option D, 2008. Right. So this NAPCC, the National Action Plan on Climate Change. Right. So this is one of the measures that is taken by the Indian government regarding the environmental sustainability. Right. This was adopted in 2008 with what is the vision or what is the objective of this plan? It is for regarding the sustainable development by looking at different strategies, right, that is applicable to multiple sectors, right? So while we are focusing on the transport sector here, but for a sustainable development, we have to look at a comprehensive, in a comprehensive manner, right? So we have to look at all the sectors, right? We have to address the sustainability as a whole. So therefore, this plan looks at multiple, sectors, including the energy sector, industry, agriculture, water, and so on. Right. So and comes up with different, plans and strategies that can be implemented so that we can achieve ecological sustainability. Right. So this was one of the plans by the Indian government adopted in 2008. Okay, question number 8 is the Federal Highway Administration FHWA traffic noise model does not consider dash in its measurements. The options are shielding adjustment, flow adjustment, segment adjustment, and area adjustment. Okay, so we have one more for D, area adjustment. Okay, any other answers? Right. So the right option, yes, it is option D, the area adjustment. Okay, so if you look at the FHWA model, so this is one of the traffic noise estimation models developed in the US. Okay, so this is the flow diagram, for the FHWA model. So we start with a reference level of the energy mean emission, right? So then we have multiple adjustments that are being, incorporated into the model. So one is for the flow adjustment, right? So the traffic flow, has an impact on the traffic noise, right? So if you have more flow, you can expect more traffic noise to be generated. So there is an adjustment factor for the distance, right? So the distance between the roadway, so the roadway is where the noise is generated. and the receiver. So the receiver is somewhat far away, where this measurement is being taken is somewhat away from the road. It's not on the road. It's somewhat it is at a particular distance from the road, right? So as you can imagine, so as we go away from the road, so the noise will go down, right? So there has to be an adjustment for this distance between the roadway and the receiver. So that is also incorporated. There is adjustments for segments as well. So the length of the roadway is also an factor that is taken into account. And then we have adjustments for shielding. The shielding is basically again between the roadway and the receiver. There could be multiple objects that can dampen the noise, right? So also the ground will also absorb a certain amount of noise, and so therefore this shielding factor is also taken into consideration, right? So all these adjustments are incorporated into the model, but there is no adjustments for the area, right? So that is not in the FHWA model, and therefore the right option is D, that the area adjustment is not considered in this model. Okay. Question number 9 is the inputs to a dispersion model consist of A. Topographical data, meteorological data, emission data, and B. All of these. Okay, so we know all for D, that it is all of these. Okay, any other answer? All right. So the right option is option B, all of these. So we have already looked at how or what factors affect the emissions, right? So we know that the source type is important, right? So as we have looked at, there are multiple types of sources, the point sources, line sources, and so on. And considering the appropriate type of source will have an implication on your model results, right? So for example, we use the line source for the roadway because it is approximately or closely relates to what is there in the field, right? So the type of source is one of the inputs that we require for modeling the emission and the emission rates of each pollutant, right? So different pollutants, they are not all pollutants are going to be emitted at the same level, right? So depends on your fuel types, right? So the engine characteristics and so on. There is going to be different rates of emissions for different pollutants, right? So that is required to get an accurate estimation of the concentrations of different pollutants. The geographical characteristics like the altitude we saw the case studies on how altitude affects the emissions of different pollutants, right? So the geographical characteristics play an important role and therefore has to be input to the model. Then the meteorological characteristics. So we know that again the climatic conditions, right? So whether it is windy or not, the temperature, all these affects the emission rates, right? Therefore, when we are modeling the emissions, vehicular emissions, so all these needs to be considered to get an good or accurate estimation of the emissions, right? So all these are required inputs for the emission model. So all these are given in the options. So therefore, the right option is that all of these are inputs to the dispersion models. Okay, question number 10 is Pollutants released in the atmosphere can spread horizontally and vertically through a phenomenon called dash. So the options are emission, concentration, dispersion, and deposition. Okay, so we have one answer, B. Okay, any other answer? Right. So the right option is it is option C, dispersion. Right. So this is by definition. So how we define dispersion, right? So basically the relates to the spread of the emissions or the pollutants, right? As we said, so the emissions are generated at a particular location, but they are not going to stay there, right? So they are going to be spread around, and so this can happen both in the horizontal and the vertical direction, and this spread is what we call as the dispersion. Okay, so emission, it is refers to the dispersion, sorry, the emission refers to the release of the pollutant into the atmosphere, right? So concentration is basically a measure, right? So how, so what is the or the level of pollutants, per unit volume, right? So how these pollutants, concentration or the density of these vary per unit volume. So that's what we call as concentration. The dispersion is what is given, right? So we already looked at that. So deposition is basically deposition means a substance, adhering to the surface of another, right? Right. So adherence onto the surface, right? So that's what we call as deposition, right? So therefore, dispersion is what we use to, when we want to call this spread of the pollutants in different directions in the atmosphere, right? So therefore, the right option is C. It is dispersion. Okay, question number 11 is the calculation of road traffic noise (CORTM) model was developed by the Transport and Road Research Laboratory on the Department of Transport of ASH. So the options are United States of America, United Kingdom, Germany, and Japan. Okay, so we have one vote for B, United Kingdom. Any other answers? Okay. So the right option is option B. It is in the United Kingdom, right? So in the third lecture, so we looked at various models from across the world, right? So from the US, we had the FHWA model, right? So from the UK, we have the CORTN model. In Germany, we looked at the RLS 90 model, and in Japan, we had the AJS, I think RTN 2008. Right? So these are the different models that were developed by different countries. So the CORTN model is from the United Kingdom. All right. So the right option is option B. Okay, moving on to question number 12 is according to the NMBP 2008 routes traffic noise emission model, the heavy goods vehicles are categorized with gross vehicle weight GVW dash. So the relationships are greater than or equal to 3.5 tons, greater than or equal to 6.5 tons, greater than or equal to 9.5 tons, and greater than or equal to 15 tons. Okay, so we have one more for A, greater than or equal to 3.5 tons. Okay, any other answers? All right. So the right option is it is option A, greater than 3.5 tons. So this NMBP routes 2008 model was developed in France. Okay, so basically it divides the vehicles into two categories. Okay, based on the gross vehicle weight. So if the gross vehicle weight is less than 3.5 tons, it is classified as light vehicle, and otherwise, if it is greater than or equal to 3.5 tons, it is categorized as a heavy vehicle, right? So it is a coarse classification. So every vehicle can only belong to one of two categories, right? So it's a broad level classification and based only on the weight of the vehicle, right? So it is that threshold used as 3.5 tons, right? So lesser than that is light vehicle and greater than that is greater than 3.5 is heavy vehicle, right? So therefore, here we are looking at the heavy vehicle category, right? Heavy goods vehicle category. So therefore, the weight has to be higher than the threshold following is not true with respect to the vehicular air pollution inventory VAPI model. So the options are: it is based on emission factors, designed for developing countries, has incorporated the climatic correction factors, has incorporated the speed related correction factor. Any answers? We have one more for B, designed for developing countries. Any other answers? All right. So let's look at the right answer now. So the right answer is option D. Yeah, has incorporated the speed related correction factor. Right. So this is with respect to the VAPA model. So we already looked at this in one of the previous questions, right? So we know that this model was developed in India and it was designed for specifically for developing countries, for use in developing countries, right? So for the geographical and the climatic conditions of developing countries, so those were taken into account, right? So when this model was developed, so we know B is true, and we also know this model is based on emission factors, right? So we looked at the core architecture of what are the different components and what are the different predictions made by this. So emission factors is one of the factors that is considered in the model, right? So based on the different inputs that we were looking at, so that is also true. It has incorporated the climatic correction factors. This is also correct. So we looked at three different correction factors, right? One for the altitude, one for the temperature, right? So these are the climatic correction factors, right? So therefore, this is also there in the model. But what we saw earlier was that the speed related correction factors were absent in the model, right? So that was one of the correction factors that was left out of this model. So therefore, this statement says that this VAPA model has incorporated it, but it is not there. Therefore, this statement is incorrect or not true. And the question is asking which is not true. So option D is not true about the VAPA model. Right. So therefore, the correct answer is option D. Question number 14 is: the Paris Agreement aims to reduce the global temperature rise to below dash. So the options are 1 degree Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius, 3 degrees Celsius, and 4 degrees Celsius. So we have one more for B, 2 degrees Celsius. Okay, any other answers? All right. So the right option is option B, 2 degrees Celsius. Right? So as I was saying in one of the earlier questions, so this Paris Agreement, right? So it took place in December 2015. So where the ultimate goal of this agreement was to limit the global warming, right? So how are we going to do that? By reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, and there is a target. So the target is to limit the global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius or preferably 1.5, right? So we also the maximum limit is 2 degrees Celsius, but we want to keep it uh, to below 1.5 degrees Celsius so that we get a climate neutral world by the mid century, that is by 2050, right? So that is the ultimate goal of this Paris Agreement that took place in 2015. So the goal is to keep it below 2 degrees. Okay, so therefore the right option is option B. Okay, question number 15 is we have given two statements. The first statement is the definition of green transition, which says that investments must accelerate the decarbonization of all aspects of our economy. Statement 2 is about green economy, which is making societies and people more resilient through a transition that is fair to all and leaves no one behind. Okay, so we have to say which of the two statements is or are true, right? Whether only one is true or two is true, or both are true or both are false. Okay, so we have one vote for C, that both the statements are true. Any other answers? All right. So the right option is option C, that both the statements 1 and 2 are true. Okay, so these two definitions are correct. So these two actually come under, right? So these are two out of the six climate positive, actions that the United Nations recommended for the governments of the world. Okay, so one of them is the green transition, which says that the investments must accelerate the decarbonization of all aspects of our economy, right? So what does that mean? So which means we should, our infrastructure or our investments so must be focused on renewable energy, right? So we should focus less on the fossil fuels and invest more on decarbonization aspects, right? So which one example is to invest in renewable sources, right? So one other example could be to invest or to develop EV infrastructure, right? So this is called as the green transition. The other action that is recommended is the green economy. So here it is more about equity, or being fair. So where making societies and people more resilient through a transition that is fair to all and leaves no one behind, right? So we looked at the different sustainable development goals, right? So one of that is to that is that we should not be biased, or our changes or the transition that we are making should not be coming at the expense of some section of the society, right? So everyone has to be involved, and everyone has to benefit, right? So therefore, that is the green economy. So these are the two out of all the six climate positive actions that was recommended, and the correct definitions are given in these statements. So therefore, the right option is option C, that both are true. Okay, question number 16 is, which one of the following institutions ordered the deregistration of diesel vehicles that are older than 10 years in the National Capital Territory of Delhi? So the options are A, Supreme Court; B, National Green Tribunal; option C is Central Pollution Control Board; and option D is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Okay, the answers. Right. So we have one vote for option C, Central Pollution Control Board. Okay, any other answers? right answer is option B. It is the National Green Tribunal, right? So the National Green Tribunal ordered the government of the National Capital Territory of Delhi to ensure that any diesel vehicle which has been there for more than 10 years should be deregistered, right? So it should not be used, right? So therefore, that was an order that was given by the NGT, right? So why was this done? Because Delhi is one of the most affected regions of due to the air pollution, right? So the air quality levels are very poor, right? So this was one of the actions that was taken. So there were many other, actions that were taken. So the retirement of the heavy vehicle or heavy diesel vehicles is one. So the usage of e-rickshaws, right? So the odd even in one of the very popular ones, that you might have heard of is the odd even scheme, right? So that was also one of the actions. To all these were taken to reduce the or to address the problem of the air pollution. So smog towers were installed, right? Water sprinkling. Why? Because sprinkling water can reduce the pollutant concentration. It helps settle down the pollutants in the air quickly. So water sprinkling, and then also the EV charging networks are also being introduced, right? So all these different actions are taken to reduce the air pollution problem in Delhi, right? So, but this particular order of deregistering the heavy diesel vehicles, that was from the National Green Tribunal. So the right option is option B. Okay, question number 17 is the National Clean Air Program NCAP targets to achieve 20% to 30% reduction in the particulate matter concentrations in non-attainment cities by the year dash, considering dash as the base year. Okay, so the options are 2020 and 2015, 2028 and 2015, 2028 and 2017, 2024 and 2017. So we have one more for A. Any other answers? Okay. So the right option is actually it is option D, 2024 and 2017. Right. So as we looked at this National Clean Air Program, so the objective of it was to reduce the particulate matter concentration by how much? By 20 to 30%. So when we say we want to achieve 20 to 30% reduction, so we need to have some base, right, or some reference level. With respect to that reference level, we are saying we have to reduce this by 20% or 30%, right? And also when you say we want to reduce by what time, right? So there should be a reference level and there should be a target, right? So target year, right? So this reference also we call it as the base year, and then this is we have the target year, right? So for this NCAP, this reference year is, or the base year is actually 2017, and the target year is actually 2024. So whatever is the particulate matter concentration in the year of 2017, right? So by the year 2024, we should have only we should have reduced it by 20 to 30%, right? So which means only 70 to 80% of whatever was the particulate matter concentration in 2017. So that is what should be there in 2024, right? So that's the objective of this NCAP program. Okay, therefore the right option is option B. Question number 18 is we have to match the dispersion models with their functions. Okay, so we have four different dispersion models given. So one is the emission model, the other is the meteorological model, C is chemical model, and D is a receptor model. So different functions, so different models serve different purposes. So some of these are listed here. So one is to describe the transport, dispersion, the vertical mixing, and the moisture in time and space. Second is to estimate temporal and spatial emission rates. Third is to describe the transformations of directly emitted particles and gases. And fourth is to infer the contribution from different primary source of emissions. So some of the matchings are already given. So we just have to pick the right matching. So where the dispersion model is mapped with the correct function. Okay, so we have one more for B. Any other answers? All right. So the right option is actually option C. Okay. So where A is matched with 2, B with 1, C with 3, and D with 4. Right? So these are what's given here are the different types of the dispersion models. Right? So we have these four different models, and we have one more which is the super source dispersion model. Right? So there are actually five different types. So four of them are given here. So if you look at the first one, so the emission model. So the emission model, as you can guess that it is going to estimate the emission rates, right? So it will estimate the spatial as well as the temporal rate. So which means that per unit area or per unit time, how much emission will be generated. So that's what this emission model will do, right? So it does this based on different factors. So based the level of activity that takes place, and also um, the emission rate that are given for different activities, right? So using these, the spatial as well as the temporal emission rates are obtained, right? So A is matched with 2, so 2 is the correct function. So B, we have the meteorological model. So the meteorological model basically tells us how the dispersion takes place, right? So how the transport, dispersion, as well as how it mixes with in the atmosphere, so across space and time, right? So this is the purpose of the meteorological model. See, we have the chemical model. So chemical model is basically mapped with three. So where chemical model tells you how these pollutants change, right? So how they change form, right? So once these are emitted, so they some may remain as such, but some of these pollutants, they may react and then take different form, right? So that this is described by the chemical model, right? So that describes the transformation of the directly emitted particles and gases. So directly emitted are what is coming from the source and how these change in nature. So that is described by the chemical model. And finally, we have the receptor model. So the receptor model is basically, it tells us what is the contribution or what is the proportion of different pollutants from different sources, right? So that is the receptor model, right? So this is the right matching. A matched with 2, B with 1, C with 3, and D with 4. So that is given in option C. Right. So question number 19 is, which of the following models considers road as an emission of finite length? So the options are Caline 4, Highway 2, Car FMI, and OSPM. So we have one vote for B, Highway 2. Any other answers? Okay, so the right option is it is the car FMI model, right? Option C, which considers the road to be of finite length, right? So all these four models that are given here, so they are the Gaussian models, right? So we looked at the four different types. So the box model, Gaussian, Lagrangian, and the CFT model. So these four come under the Gaussian type, right? So however, the assumptions that are made in these different models are different, right? So as we already saw that road is considered to be a line source, right? So we saw that it is in the one-dimensional variation that we see in the in the emissions. Well, okay. So, but the models will assume that either this line source is of infinite length or of finite length, right? So, the scaline and highway 2 as well as OSPM, they consider it to be of infinite length. So, where the stress that is under consideration is one particular element or segment of this infinite line source, right? So, that's the assumption made there. Whereas in the car FMI model, right? So the road source is assumed to be of finite length, right? So which means that the volume or the traffic volume is assumed to be a constant. It does not vary because the road length is considered to be finite. So the volume is taken to be constant, right? So those are the assumptions or how these are the variations between the models, right? So but all these consider that the wind direction will be perpendicular to this line source. So that is one thing that is common, but the difference is in whether they assume it to be infinite or finite thing, right? So in that way, this option C differs from the other three by considering the road to be of finite length source. Therefore, the right option is C. Okay, question number 20 is we have to match the different global initiatives with their key results. Okay, so we have four global initiatives that from the ones that we looked at in the lectures. So the first one is the United Nations Conference on Human Environment. B is our common future. C, Rio Earth Summit, and D is the Paris Agreement. And so some of the results are given on the second column. So one is to limit the global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius by reducing GHG emissions. Second is the first definition of sustainable development that was given. Option the third is creation of the United Nations Environmental Program, and fourth is the adoption of the UN framework on climate change, that is UNFCCC. So we have these four matchings. So the right one has to be picked. So we have one more for option A. The answers. All right. So the right option is it is option A. Okay. So where A is matched with 3, so B is matched with 2, C is matched with 4, and D is matched with 1. Right. So we already know these for the Paris Agreement. We have discussed it multiple times now. So it is the key, the goal or the result that came out of it was this, to limit the global warming to under 2 degrees Celsius by reducing the GHG emissions. Right. So with this we already know. Right. So D is matched with 1. So the first, the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment. So this is where the creation of the UNEPA, the United Nations Environment Program, took place. Right. So A is with 3. So B is our common future. Right. So this is actually an area. So actually this is formally the Brundtland Report in 1987, but it is also known as our common future. So this is where the first definition of the sustainable development that was given, right? So we looked at this definition in the very beginning of this course, right? So where sustainable development was defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs, right? So this was the first definition of sustainable development, and that was given in that came out of this Brundtland report in 1987. So B is matched with 2 and C. So the only thing that is left is option 4. So in the Rio Earth Summit, so the UN framework on climate change that was adopted, right? So therefore C is matched with 4. So this mapping is given in option A, right? So as I said in the last week, so the trick that you will use to reduce, to save some time in the matching question is to eliminate the options, right? So here we know D is with matched with 1. We are sure about that because we already know that. So with that, you can eliminate B and C straight away because their incorrect mapping is given. So we have, if you find one of A, B, or C, so you can directly arrive at the answer. Okay, so that will save you some time. Okay. Question number 21 is the Kyoto Protocol does not apply to which of the following greenhouse gases? So the options are carbon dioxide, methane, sulfur hexafluoride, and nitrogen trifluoride. vote for D, nitrogen trifluoride. Any other answers? Okay, so let's take a look at the right option. So right option is, it is option D, nitrogen trifluoride, right? So this Kyoto Protocol, so this this Kyoto Protocol came in 1997, right? So where the objective of this Kyoto Protocol was to reduce the greenhouse gas emission, right? So again, so this was actually targeted for developed and industrial countries, right? So where others are more global, so this was specifically targeting the developed and the industrialized nations, so where they had to reduce six major greenhouse gases by 5.2% compared to what was the level in 1990s, right? So these six greenhouse gases that were a part of this Kyoto Protocol were carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride, right? So we are given three out of these six here: carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur hexafluoride. So nitrogen trifluoride is also one of the greenhouse gases, but this is not covered in the Kyoto Protocol. Okay, so therefore the right option is option D. Okay, so with that we are coming to the end of the session for week number 9. So if you have any questions or clarifications, you can ask them now. Otherwise we'll wrap the session up here. Okay, and we'll meet again next week. Next Sunday is 4 to 6 p.m. Thank you for attending. So if you have any questions, so you can ask. Otherwise we'll wrap it up. Okay, yeah, thank you. So we'll close the